What if, on an ordinary day, you stumbled across someone from your past, someone you never thought you'd see again, in the most heartbreaking situation imaginable? That's exactly what happened to Ethan Hayes, a successful CEO whose life took an unexpected turn the moment he looked into the eyes of a homeless mother on the street. Ethan Hayes, a well-known tech entrepreneur and CEO of a billion-dollar company, was crossing a crowded intersection in downtown Chicago when someone, stopped him in his tracks. Sitting on the edge of the sidewalk, dressed in layers of torn, grimy clothes, was a woman whose presence radiated quiet suffering. Her hair was messy, her face marked with exhaustion, and beside her sat two small girls, identical twins, around 4 years old, shivering in worn-out jackets, one of them softly crying. "It's okay, sweetheart," the woman whispered to the child, stroking her tangled hair. "Mommy's right here. We'll be okay." Ethan felt a jolt in his chest. That voice. That face. Even beneath the dirt and pain, it couldn't be. But it was. Ava Monroe. The girl he had secretly loved throughout high school. The same girl who once laughed at his nervous attempts to talk to her in the school hallway. She was confident, radiant, untouchable. Back then, Ethan was just a shy boy who sat in the back of the class and dreamed too big. Now she was here. On the street. With children. He stepped closer cautiously. "Ava?" he asked, his voice breaking. She looked up slowly, her eyes widening in disbelief. "Ethan?" she whispered. For a moment, neither of them moved. The noise of the city faded into silence between them. Then Ava looked down quickly, wrapping her arms around the girls as if trying to shield them from the world. "You shouldn't be here," she muttered. "Please, just walk away." Ethan couldn't. He wouldn't. One of the twins clung to her mother's arm, eyes wide and tearful. The other buried her face in Ava's shoulder, clearly too tired to cry anymore. "You're not okay," Ethan said, kneeling down to her level. "Come with me. I can help you." "No," Ava protested, her voice cracking. "You don't owe me anything. Just leave us be. I'm not leaving you out here in the cold with your daughters, Ava. Not a chance. Please, just let me help." The twins stared at him, unsure, but curious. The one who'd been crying wiped her cheeks and whispered, "Mommy, who is he?" Ava hesitated. But something in Ethan's expression, a mix of concern and a kindness she hadn't seen in years, made her give in. Ethan pulled out his phone and called his driver. "I need you here. Now." He put the phone away and turned back to her. "You're not staying here another minute." When the car arrived, Ethan gently helped Ava up and picked up one of the girls. Ava carried the other. The children were quiet, their heads resting against their mother's shoulders. As they drove toward Ethan's penthouse in the West Loop, the city lights flashed across the car windows. The silence inside was thick, filled with everything unsaid. Ava stared out at the streets she had walked so many nights in fear and hunger. Now she was heading toward warmth, but also toward memories she wasn't sure she was ready to face. Ethan sat beside her, glancing at her every so often, still trying to process the moment his past had suddenly collided with his present. When they arrived, Ava hesitated outside the building. The doorman greeted Ethan with familiarity, but gave her a curious look. Ethan didn't care. "You don't have to worry about anything tonight," he said softly. "You and the girls are safe here." He guided her inside. As the elevator climbed, Ava clutched her daughters tightly, uncertain of what waited for them at the top. Ethan had no idea what had happened to Ava since high school, but he was determined to find out. And to help, no matter what it took. The city was still quiet when the elevator doors opened into Ethan's penthouse. Ava stepped in cautiously, the twins clinging to her sides. Her eyes widened as she took in the expansive space, high ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows with a skyline view, and warm lighting that softened the sleek, modern design. It was the kind of place she'd only seen in magazines. Now she was standing in it, exhausted, broken, and unsure if she even belonged. "You don't have to say anything," Ethan said gently as he helped set the girls down on the plush sofa. "Just rest. I'll take care of everything." His voice was calm, reassuring. But behind it was something else, the weight of unspoken questions and memories he hadn't dared revisit in years. Mrs. Dorsey, his longtime housekeeper, entered the room quietly, her eyes quickly assessing the scene. She gave Ethan a discreet nod and whispered, "I'll prepare a guest room and bring something warm for the little ones." Ava sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands trembling slightly as she stroked Hazel's hair. The child was already dozing off, safe in a way she hadn't been in months. Harper, her twin, nestled against Ethan without hesitation, surprising both of them. "I'll get them some pajamas," Ethan said, already moving toward a storage closet. "They can stay here tonight." "You too, Ava." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Everything felt too overwhelming. After the twins were fed and tucked into a cozy guest room, fast asleep for the first time on clean sheets, under a warm blanket, Ava remained seated in the living room, silent, staring into the flames of the fireplace Ethan had lit. She finally spoke, her voice barely audible. "They haven't slept like that in I don't even remember how long." Ethan sat across from her, resting his elbows on his knees. "They're safe now. So are you." Ava glanced at him, uncertain. "You don't even know us anymore." "Maybe not," he replied. "But I want to." There was a long pause. The crackle of the fire filled the silence between them. Ava shifted in her seat. This isn't real. People don't just show up in your worst moment and save you. Not unless they want something." Ethan looked at her steadily. "You really think I want something from you?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. "I spent so long surviving that I forgot what trust even feels like." Ethan leaned back, taking a slow breath. "I'm not asking you to trust me tonight. I just want you to rest. That's all. Tomorrow we talk." Ava looked at him again, but this time her gaze lingered. There was something about the way Ethan sat there, calm, patient, waiting, that made the edges of her fear soften just a little. "Okay," she whispered. "Tomorrow." That night, as Ava lay beside her daughters in the guest room, her mind raced through the years that had brought her to this moment. Cold nights. Missed meals. Rejections. She had become a master at hiding pain behind tired smiles. But this night was different. Her girls were warm. Her body finally still. And in the next room was a man who had once been invisible to her, and now might be her only hope. Meanwhile, Ethan stood by the window in his office, staring out at the lights of Chicago. He couldn't stop thinking about her. What had happened to her after high school? Who had failed her so badly that she'd ended up on the street with 2 kids? And perhaps the question that haunted him most: was he meant to find her again? As the clock ticked past midnight, either of them could sleep, for different reasons. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just a chance encounter. This was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted. Morning light poured through the wide windows of Ethan's penthouse, casting soft gold across the polished floors. The city had already begun to buzz below, but inside, the apartment was still, like it was holding its breath. Ava woke up before the twins. She lay still, listening to the even breaths of Harper and Hazel beside her, watching their small chests rise and fall under the covers. For the first time in what felt like forever, her daughters weren't waking up to the cold or to sirens echoing through alleyways. They weren't hungry. They weren't crying. They were safe. But Ava's heart felt anything but calm. Down the hall, Ethan was already up, dressed in a casual button-down shirt and jeans, his laptop open but untouched on the kitchen island. He kept glancing toward the hallway, waiting. When Ava finally stepped into the room, he stood instinctively. "Coffee?" he asked gently. She nodded. Yes, please. He poured her a cup without another word. She took it, her fingers brushing his for the briefest moment. They sat at the small table near the windows, city sounds muffled by glass and quiet tension. Ethan studied her face. The tired lines. The hesitancy in her eyes. The way she clutched her mug like it was her anchor to this unfamiliar place. I meant what I said last night. He started. You don't have to explain anything right now. But I'd like to understand. If you're ready. Ava stared into her coffee, swirling it gently. A long silence followed. Then, finally, she spoke. When I graduated high school, I didn't have a plan, she said quietly. But I had Jake. Ethan's chest tightened at the name. He remembered Jake Monroe, charming, loud, cruel when no one was looking. The kind of guy who had everything and treated it like nothing. He was exciting, Ava continued, her voice heavy with regret. He made me feel seen, important. I thought he loved me. Maybe he did. In his own way. Her hands trembled slightly. She set the mug down. A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. I was terrified, but weirdly hopeful. I thought he'd stay. I thought we'd figure it out. Ethan didn't interrupt. He let her speak at her own pace. But when I told him, Ava said, eyes glistening, he laughed. Told me I'd ruined my life. That he didn't sign up for this. She blinked slowly. And then he left. Disappeared. Ethan's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. My parents tried to help at first, Ava went on, but they were already struggling. When the twins were born, I did everything I could, took night shifts, cleaned houses, worked in diners. Anything. But when Hazel got sick and needed medication, I had to choose between rent and her treatment. Ava's voice cracked. I chose her. She looked up at Ethan, eyes full of unspoken pain. We were evicted. We spent the next year in shelters. And when those filled up, we ended up on the street. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low and full of emotion. Why didn't you reach out to someone? Anyone? Ava gave a bitter half-smile. Reach out to who? The people who used to mock me for being the queen bee? The girls I once laughed with while laughing at others? The teachers I ignored? I burned a lot of bridges in high school, Ethan. She paused. And I treated you like you didn't even exist. Ethan looked at her, not with anger, but with something far more difficult to process, understanding. I was cruel to you, she said. You didn't deserve it. You were a teenager, Ethan said softly. We all were. People change. She studied him. You changed a lot. He gave a small smile. Not as much as you think. Another pause. Then Ethan asked the question he'd been holding back all morning. Ava, do the girls know who their father is? She shook her head. No. And they never will. He made his choice. And now I've made mine. There was silence again. But this time, it didn't feel heavy. It felt like the beginning of something. I want to help you, Ethan said finally. Not just today or this week. I mean really help you long term. Ava's eyes narrowed, cautious again. Why? He hesitated for a moment, then answered. Because I still see the girl I once loved from afar. And now, I see a woman who's stronger than she's ever known. Ava looked away, blinking quickly. You don't know me anything, she whispered. I know, he said. That's why I mean it. As Ava processes Ethan's offer, new questions begin to stir. Can she learn to trust again? And what happens when the past, one she thought was buried, tries to force its way back into her life? In the days that followed, Ava slowly began to adjust to the rhythm of Ethan's home, though the idea of home still felt distant, like a word that didn't quite belong to her. Every morning, The twins woke up wrapped in soft blankets, their laughter echoing down the hallway as they ran barefoot through the living room, chasing each other in matching pajamas Mrs. Dorsey had bought for them. Ethan would often appear in the kitchen, already dressed and sipping coffee, smiling at the sound of life that had returned to his once quiet apartment. Ava, meanwhile, still moved carefully, as though afraid the floor beneath her might vanish. She helped set the table for breakfast, folded laundry without being asked, and insisted on washing the dishes even when Mrs. Dorsey gently protested. "I need to feel useful," she explained with a tired smile. Ethan didn't push. He watched. He watched her tuck the girls in at night. He watched her eyes light up when Harper learned to read a new word. He watched the way she paused sometimes, staring out the window, lost in thought, as if part of her was still waiting for everything to fall apart again. One morning, while the girls were drawing in the sunroom, Ethan approached Ava in the kitchen. "I was thinking," he said, handing her a fresh cup of tea. "You once told me you didn't finish school." "Right." Ava nodded, a bit guarded. "I had to drop out a year after the girls were born." "What if," Ethan said carefully, "you had the chance to finish? To study again, business, design, whatever you wanted?" She laughed softly. "Ethan, I haven't opened a textbook in years." "But you could," he said, gently insistent. "I'll take care of the girls while you study. You'd have support here. Real support." Ava looked at him, unsure how to process kindness without expectation. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Ethan hesitated, then spoke the truth. "Because helping you feels like helping myself." There was a beat of silence. "Let me think about it," Ava finally said. That same afternoon, they went out shopping for the girls, new shoes, winter coats, coloring books. Harper fell in love with a sparkly purple dress, and Hazel picked a stuffed fox she named Oliver. Watching them twirl in front of a store mirror, Ava felt a sting in her chest, a mix of joy and guilt. They'd missed out on so much. And now, suddenly, they had everything. Later that evening, Ethan cooked pasta while Ava helped the twins set the table. The scent of garlic and herbs filled the apartment. Laughter mingled with the soft sound of jazz playing in the background. It was normal. And that's what scared Ava most. Because normal never lasted. That night, after the girls were asleep, Ava walked into the kitchen to find Ethan cleaning up. She leaned against the doorway, watching him in silence for a moment. "I want to try," she said. He turned. "Try what?" "School. A course. Something. For me. For them." Ethan smiled, not wide or dramatic, just a quiet, proud smile that said more than any words could. "We'll figure it out," he said. But just as a sense of safety began to take root, a shadow crept in. The next morning, while checking her phone for messages from a community college Ethan had recommended, Ava saw it. A text from an unknown number. No name. Just a photo. Ethan. At a restaurant. Sitting across from a woman in a sleek blazer. They were mid-conversation, drinks on the table. The photo was clearly taken without his knowledge. Beneath it, a message. "You really think he's being honest with you?" Ava's blood turned cold. Who sent the message? And what secrets, if any, is Ethan hiding? Ava is forced to confront her fear of being fooled again, and must decide whether to trust the one person who's given her everything. The message stayed with her all morning. Ava couldn't stop staring at the photo. Ethan, smiling. Relaxed. Talking to a woman who looked like she belonged in his world, polished, poised, powerful. The kind of woman who could walk into any boardroom and command attention. Ava, in her borrowed clothes and worn sneakers, felt like the distance between them had suddenly doubled. She didn't show the photo to the girls, of course. She helped them brush their hair, made their breakfast, smiled when they talked about their stuffed animals, all while her heart thudded like a warning drum in her chest. When Ethan returned home that afternoon, he immediately sensed something had shifted. Ava was quieter, distant. She barely looked at him. He waited until the girls were playing in the other room before finally asking, "Did something happen?" Ava hesitated, then pulled out her phone and handed it to him. "I got this." Ethan's brows furrowed as he looked at the screen. The photo. The message. His jaw tightened. "That was a business lunch," he said. "She's a consultant we're bringing in for a new tech rollout." "That's it." Ava crossed her arms, staring at the floor. "Then why did someone send this to me like it's a warning?" "I don't know," he said honestly. "But I'll find out." She looked up at him then, and her eyes weren't angry. They were afraid. "Ethan, I want to believe you. I really do. But I've been lied to before. So many times. And I don't know how to tell the difference anymore." He took a slow step toward her, then another. "You can ask me anything. I'll tell you everything." "Why are you doing this for me?" she asked suddenly, her voice rising. "Why open your home, your life, your time? What do you want from me?" Ethan looked at her, really looked. "Nothing," he said softly. "Except for you to believe that I see you. Not the girl from high school. Not a charity case. Not someone broken. I see you now. And I care." Ava's eyes brimmed with tears, but she turned away before they could fall. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I know," he said. "I am too." A long silence followed. Neither moved. Finally, Ava took a shaky breath. "Find out who sent it. I need to know." "I will." That night, while the twins slept and Ava sat by the window in quiet reflection, Ethan made calls. By morning, he had the answer. A former employee. Fired 6 months earlier for unethical conduct. The consultant in the photo had nothing to do with it. The message was an attempt at revenge, a petty strike meant to shake Ethan's image by hitting close to his personal life. When he showed Ava the screenshots and the proof, she stared at them for a long time. "Why would someone go that far?" "Because they wanted to make you doubt me," Ethan said. "And they almost did." Ava looked at him. "I'm sorry. You don't have to apologize for protecting yourself," he replied. "You've been through enough." Then, after a pause, he added, "But I hope one day you'll believe, not everyone leaves." Ava swallowed the lump in her throat. And in that moment, something softened. Not fully. Not permanently. But enough to let in the light. As trust begins to rebuild, Ava receives another unexpected piece of news, this time from her own past. Could it undo everything she and Ethan have started to build? A few days passed. The storm that had rattled Ava's trust had calmed. She was starting to settle into something new, something dangerously close to peace. Ethan kept his promise, no pressure, no expectations. He encouraged Ava to begin a short online course in entrepreneurship. He watched the twins after dinner while she studied at the dining table, and each night, she grew a little more confident, a little less afraid. Until a letter arrived. It was late afternoon when Mrs. Dorsey handed Ava a small white envelope. "No return address," she said. Ava frowned. The handwriting on the front was unfamiliar. She opened it cautiously. Her hands froze when she read the first line. "Ava, I know I don't deserve to reach out. But I want to see my daughters." The air drained from her lungs. It was signed Jake. Ava hadn't seen or heard from Jake Monroe in over 5 years. He hadn't texted. Hadn't asked. Hadn't sent a single dollar. He was a ghost, the kind you bury for good. But now, he was reaching out. That evening, she sat at the kitchen table, the letter folded in front of her like a loaded weapon. Ethan entered, drying his hands with a dish towel. He stopped when he saw her expression. "Ava?" he asked carefully. She handed him the letter in silence. He read it slowly, his expression hardening. "Do you want to respond?" he asked. "I don't know," she said. "I honestly don't know what I feel right now. Rage. Fear. Confusion." Ethan nodded. "You don't owe him anything. But I owe the girls honesty," she whispered. "They'll ask one day. I need to be able to say I didn't run from the truth." She stood up, pacing. What if he wants to be part of their lives now? After all these years? What if he's changed? Ethan stood too. And what if he hasn't? Silence. Ava sat back down, burying her face in her hands. Why now? Why, after everything? Ethan sat beside her. Do you want me to talk to him? Ava looked at him, eyes wide. You'd do that? I'd do anything to protect you and those girls. Anything. She took a breath. Then yes. Talk to him. When Ethan tracks down Jake for a private meeting, the truth comes out, and it's worse than Ava imagined. But now she must make a choice, confront the past or leave it buried for good. 2 days later, Ethan found himself standing outside a worn-out cafe on the outskirts of the city, a place far from glass towers and business lunches. The kind of place where people came to disappear. Jake Monroe was already there, sitting alone at a back table, nursing a black coffee. He looked different than Ethan remembered. Not older, just more hollow. Like a man who had spent years running from himself and didn't quite know where to stop. Ethan approached calmly, his expression unreadable. You came, Jake said, leaning back in his chair, attempting nonchalance. Wasn't sure you would. I'm not here for you, Ethan replied, pulling out the chair opposite him. I'm here for Ava. And for the girls. Jake smirked. So she told you about me. She told me everything. And now, I want to hear your side. So let's get to it. Jake shrugged, pretending to be casual. Look, I made mistakes. I know that. I panicked. I wasn't ready to be a father. I didn't have the tools, the money, the mindset. Ethan raised an eyebrow. You had a choice. You left. And now, after 5 years of silence, you send her a letter? Jake hesitated, just for a second, and that was all Ethan needed to see, hesitation, not remorse. I just want to know my daughters, Jake said. Is that so wrong? Ethan leaned forward, his voice sharp and low. Is it about knowing your daughters, or about control? Jake scoffed. You don't know me. I know the damage you caused, Ethan said. I've seen it in Ava's eyes. In how she flinches when the doorbell rings. In how she still wonders if she deserves happiness. That's the legacy you left. Jake's jaw tensed. I'm not here to fight you, Ethan continued. But if this is some stunt to disrupt her life, you need to think very carefully about what you're doing. Jake was silent for a moment. Then he leaned in, his voice colder than before. Let me ask you something, Mr. CEO. Are you planning to be their new dad? Is that what this is about? Playing house? Ethan didn't flinch. I'm not playing anything. I'm building something. With Ava. And with the girls. Something you walked away from. Jake sat back, chuckling bitterly. She never gave me a second chance. She begged for help. Ethan snapped. You just never looked back. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Jake leaned forward again, this time more serious. Look, I don't want trouble. But I have rights. Ethan narrowed his eyes. Do you? Jake pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his jacket. A faded copy of Harper and Hazel's birth certificates, and signed in the father field. You were never there. No court's going to back you up. Jake folded the paper slowly. Still, he said, she should know I'm not disappearing this time. Ethan stood up. Then you should know this. If you try to hurt her again, I will fight you with everything I have. He walked away, leaving Jake alone at the table, the coffee now cold, like every excuse he had offered. Later that night, Ethan returned home. The twins were already asleep. Ava was sitting on the couch, nervously twisting a thread from the blanket on her lap. "Well?" she asked. Ethan sat beside her. "He hasn't changed, Ava. He showed no remorse. No respect. He didn't ask about the girls, not once." Ava swallowed hard, trying to contain the disappointment that still managed to sting, despite everything. "What does he want?" "To rattle you," Ethan said. "And maybe to feel powerful again. But he doesn't have any legal standing. You're protected. The girls are safe." She nodded, but her hands still shook slightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Ethan looked at her. "Don't be. None of this is your fault." Then, gently, he added, "You have every right to move on. And to choose what's best for you and your daughters, not what guilt tells you you owe." With Jake's threat looming in the background, Ava faces a crossroads. Will she continue to run from the pain, or finally take full ownership of the new life she's building, with Ethan, and for the girls? The next morning, sunlight filtered softly through the curtains. But Ava didn't feel its warmth. She had barely slept. Her mind had been replaying Ethan's words, Jake's letter, the look in her daughter's eyes when they called Ethan safe. Now, standing in the doorway of the girls' bedroom, she watched them sleep, Harper clutching her stuffed fox, Hazel curled into a tight ball. They had no idea what she was about to do. And maybe that was a good thing. She stepped into the living room where Ethan sat, already dressed for work, typing quietly on his laptop. He looked up when he saw her. "Hey, I want to talk to him," she said. Ethan closed the laptop gently. "Jake?" She nodded. "Face to face. Just once. I need to look him in the eyes and say everything I never got to say. For my own peace." Ethan hesitated, then said, "I'll go with you." "No," Ava replied. "Not this time. I need to do it alone." He didn't like the idea. She could see it in his expression. But he respected it. "You sure?" "I have to be." That afternoon, Ava met Jake in a quiet corner of Lincoln Park, neutral ground. There were joggers passing, mothers pushing strollers, children laughing in the distance. It made the weight of what she was about to do feel even heavier. Jake sat on a bench, staring at the lake. He looked like he hadn't slept either. When Ava approached, he stood awkwardly. "You came." She didn't sit. She stayed standing. "I won't take long," she said calmly. "I'm not here for a fight. I'm not here for forgiveness. I'm here to give you closure, and to claim mine." Jake opened his mouth, but she held up a hand. "You left. You made your choice. And for years, I let the silence eat away at me. I thought maybe I did something wrong. Maybe I wasn't enough. But now I know." She took a breath. "You were never capable of love. Not real love. Not the kind that stays." Jake flinched. "You don't get to step back into their lives just because you feel guilty or curious or bored. Harper and Hazel don't know you. And they won't, not by my choice, but by yours. I want to make it right," he muttered. "You can't," she said. "But you can leave us alone." Jake looked away, jaw clenched. "You're really doing this?" "I already did it," Ava said, her voice firmer now. "I built a life for them from nothing. I held them through nights you'll never know about. I chose them. Every time. And now I'm choosing them again, by keeping them safe from you." Jake stood slowly. "You've changed." "No," she said, turning to walk away. "I just stopped waiting for you." Back at the penthouse, Ethan was waiting near the window, pretending to scroll through emails. But his eyes kept drifting to the elevator. When it opened and Ava stepped in, he could see it in her face. Something had shifted. "Well?" he asked gently. "It's done," she said. "And I mean that. I finally said goodbye. Not just to him, to the version of me that thought I needed him. She walked closer. And now, she added, looking up at Ethan, I'm ready to stop surviving. I want to live. Really live. And I want that life to include you, if you still want it. Ethan stepped closer without a word. He didn't answer her with sentences, just wrapped his arms around her and held her as if nothing else in the world existed. And for the first time in years, Ava let herself believe it was true. Ava is finally free, emotionally and mentally. But just as she begins to build something beautiful, a surprise she never expected is about to reshape everything, again. The days that followed Ava's final conversation with Jake felt lighter. She smiled more, slept better, studied with focus. Even her posture had changed, no longer hunched from the invisible weight she'd carried for years. The girls were thriving. They giggled louder, clung to Ethan with affection, and started calling the penthouse home without hesitation. Ethan noticed the difference. Not just in Ava, but in the air between them. There was a softness now, a quiet confidence. And he knew she was ready to begin again. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Ava paused suddenly. The scent of scrambled eggs hit her wrong. Her stomach turned. She dropped the spatula and rushed to the bathroom. Later that afternoon, as the symptoms persisted, nausea, dizziness, exhaustion, Mrs. Dorsey tilted her head with a knowing look. When was your last cycle, dear? Ava blinked, trying to remember. And then everything stopped. Could it be? No. It wasn't possible, was it? Just to be sure, she bought a test. Then another. And another. Each one told the same story. Clear. Unmistakable. Life-changing. She was pregnant. Ava sat on the edge of the bathtub, test in hand, her other hand covering her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, not of fear this time, but disbelief and wonder. This time, she wasn't alone. That evening, Ethan returned home early. The girls were in the playroom, and Ava was sitting in the living room, nervously folding and unfolding a small white piece of paper. When he walked in, she stood. Ethan, she said softly, can we talk? His brows rose with concern. Of course. She handed him the note. Her handwriting. One simple line. We're having a baby. Ethan stared at it, not breathing. Then he looked at her. Ava? She nodded, barely able to speak. I just found out. I wasn't expecting this. I didn't plan it. I didn't even think. But before she could spiral, Ethan crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. You don't have to say anything, he whispered. This is the most beautiful surprise of my life. Tears slipped from her eyes as she rested her head against his chest. You're not afraid? She asked. Of course I am, he said with a gentle smile. But I'm more sure than scared. Ava laughed softly through her tears. So am I. Ava and Ethan began preparing for their new future as parents. But unexpected emotions, buried insecurities, and the pressure of a growing family test their love in ways either of them could have predicted. The news of the pregnancy brought a wave of joy through the penthouse. Harper and Hazel were the first to know, and their excitement was pure, unfiltered. Can we name the baby Sparkle? Harper asked, twirling in the living room. I want a brother, Hazel declared, hugging Ava's waist. No, wait, a sister. Ava smiled, overwhelmed by their joy. For them, a baby was a magical event. For her, it was something much more complex. For Ethan, it was transformation. He threw himself into preparing for their new chapter. He cleared out his home office and began converting it into a nursery, complete with soft lighting, plush rugs, and shelves for bedtime books. Every weekend, they visited baby stores, comparing cribs and strollers. Ethan did research, made lists, watched tutorials on car seat safety. He was all in. But Ava, couldn't ignore a familiar ache in her chest. One night, after the girls were asleep and the nursery half built, Ava stood in the doorway, staring at the walls. Ethan walked up behind her. "You've been quiet lately." She turned to him slowly. "I'm scared." "Of what?" She looked down at her hands. "Of not being enough." Again. Ethan moved closer, placing a hand on her back. "You've already been more than enough, for two little girls who didn't have anyone else. You carried them through chaos. You protected them when you had nothing. You gave them joy out of scraps." He gently turned her to face him. "And this baby? Will come into the world loved. Wanted. Safe." Tears welled in Ava's eyes. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," he said. "But we do it together." She nodded, not because the fear vanished, but because his presence made it bearable. In the weeks that followed, Ava found herself softening again, not just toward the pregnancy, but toward herself. She began journaling every night, sometimes writing letters to the baby, sometimes just thoughts she was too afraid to say out loud. Ethan read parenting books, but also learned when to simply hold her hand and say nothing. Some nights they'd sit on the terrace, watching the city lights, dreaming up baby names. Other nights they'd lie awake, Ava's head on Ethan's chest, wondering aloud what kind of parents they'd become. But underneath the warmth were deeper questions neither had spoken aloud yet. Would the weight of Ava's past resurface when the baby arrived? Would Ethan, once consumed by work and solitude, be able to handle the chaos of full-time fatherhood? They didn't know. But they were willing to find out. Together. As the due date approaches, an unexpected complication puts Ava's pregnancy at risk, and both she and Ethan are forced to confront the fragility of everything they've built, and the strength it takes to hold on. It happened on a Thursday morning. Ava had just finished reading a bedtime story to Harper and Hazel, who were home from school with mild colds. The apartment was filled with the sound of cartoons and the scent of soup simmering in the kitchen. Everything felt peaceful. Until it didn't. A sharp pain gripped Ava's lower abdomen. Sudden. Piercing. She dropped the glass of water she was holding. It shattered on the kitchen floor. "Mommy?" Hazel's voice was small, uncertain. Ava leaned against the counter, her breath shallow. "It's okay, baby. Stay there," she called Ethan. He picked up on the first ring. "I'm coming," he said before she could finish the sentence. 20 minutes later, they were at the hospital. Ethan didn't let go of her hand once. The doctor spoke in calm, measured tones, but his words carried weight. "There's no emergency at the moment," he said, looking at Ava gently. "But you need to rest. More than you have been. There's some strain. We need to monitor the baby closely from here on out." Ava nodded, swallowing tears she didn't want to let fall. Back at home, the girls were asleep, unaware. Ethan carried Ava to the couch like she was made of glass. He tucked a blanket around her, kissed her forehead, then sat on the floor beside her, silent, watching, breathing with her. "I'm sorry," Ava whispered. "Don't," Ethan said softly. "This isn't your fault. You've done more than anyone could ever ask. Now it's my turn to hold you." That night, as the city buzzed on outside, Ava realized something terrifying and beautiful all at once. She didn't just love Ethan. She needed him. Not because she was weak, but because, for the first time in her life, she had someone she could lean on without fear of falling. In the days that followed, Ethan became her shield. He rearranged his work schedule, hired a private nurse, took over every detail: meals, medicine, bedtime routines. Ava rested. And slowly, the fear that had crept back and began to fade again. One night, while lying beside him in bed, she whispered, "I thought I'd lose everything, again." Ethan turned to face her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "You won't. I won't let that happen." Ava looked into his eyes. I believe you, she said. And this time, she meant it completely. The weeks pass, and Ava reaches full term, but the day of the birth brings more than just a baby into the world. A moment of crisis forces Ethan to confront something he never expected: the possibility of losing both Ava and the child he's grown to love before he even gets to say hello. The contractions started just after midnight. Ava had been sleeping restlessly, her hand instinctively resting over her stomach. When the first wave of pain hit, she sat up straight, breathless, heart pounding. "Ethan," she called softly. He was already awake. He always was these days, listening for any shift in her breathing, any sign the baby might be coming. He was at her side in seconds. "It's time?" She nodded, gripping his arm as another contraction built like a storm inside her. He helped her up, supported her as they made their way to the elevator, bags already packed, the nurse alerted. By the time they reached the hospital, the pain had deepened, not just physically, but emotionally. Ava was quiet, focused. But Ethan saw something in her eyes that chilled him. Fear. Not for the baby. For herself. The doctors moved quickly. The baby's heart rate was fluctuating. Ava's blood pressure was dropping. Nurses whispered updates to each other behind masks. Ethan wasn't allowed into the delivery room immediately. He stood outside in the hallway, fists clenched, eyes locked on the closed doors, where the woman he loved was fighting to bring their child into the world. Time stopped. He thought of the first day he saw her again, dirty, broken, forgotten by the world. He thought of the nights she cried herself to sleep, the laughter of the twins in the garden, the moment she handed him that note, "We're having a baby." And now she was behind those doors, and he couldn't do anything but pray. Inside, Ava felt her strength fading. The light above her blurred. Voices echoed. But she held on to one thing, the memory of Ethan's voice. "You're not alone anymore." She focused on that. On him. And with one final cry, full of love, pain, and the strength of 1,000 forgotten days, the room fell silent. Then, a cry. Not hers. The baby's. A nurse laughed softly. "It's a boy." Ethan didn't breathe until the doctor finally stepped into the hallway. "She's stable," he said. "And your son is perfect." Ethan pressed his hand to his chest, overwhelmed. When he entered the room, Ava was pale but conscious, her eyes soft and glassy. She smiled when she saw him. "We made it." He came to her side and kissed her forehead. Then, carefully, the nurse placed the baby in Ava's arms. Ethan leaned in close, eyes full of wonder. He had dark hair, tiny fingers that gripped Ava's gown. He was small, but already strong. "What do we call him?" Ethan whispered. Ava looked at the baby, then at Ethan. "Hope," she said. "He's proof that there's always another chance." Now a family of 5, Ava and Ethan begin their next chapter, learning what it means to truly belong, to forgive, and to build a love that can withstand not just the past, but everything that lies ahead. The day they brought baby Noah home, the apartment felt different. Quieter. Softer. Sacred. Harper and Hazel tiptoed through the hallways, whispering like the walls themselves were listening. They peered into the nursery, wide-eyed with awe as Ava carefully laid Noah in his crib for the first time. "He's so small," Harper whispered. "He smells like clouds," Hazel replied. Ava smiled, exhaustion shadowing her face, but her eyes glowing with something deeper than sleep could ever restore: peace. Noah slept. The girls drew pictures for him and sang lullabies that made no sense. Ethan watched from the doorway, hands in his pockets, heart fuller than he ever knew it could be. But with new life came new weight. The nights were hard. Noah cried often. Ava's body ached. Her emotions sat just beneath the surface, fragile as glass. She'd hold Noah at 3 a.m. in the rocking chair and sometimes cry quietly, not from pain, but from something harder to name. Guilt. Fear. Even joy, the kind that feels so overwhelming it almost hurts. One night, Ethan found her like that. The nursery was dim. Rain tapped gently against the windows. "You should be sleeping," he said softly, kneeling beside her. Ava didn't look up. "I don't know how." He reached for her hand, gently prying Noah from her arms and placing the baby in the crib. Then he helped her to her feet and led her out of the room, down the hallway, past the girls' rooms, to the living room where the city sparkled silently outside the windows. They sat on the couch in the dark, the only light coming from the skyline. "I'm happy," Ava said. "But I'm scared, too. Is that normal?" Ethan rested his hand on hers. "It's the most honest thing you could feel." She looked at him. "Do you ever doubt yourself?" "Every day," he said. "But then I look at you, and at them, and I remind myself why I keep going." She smiled weakly. "It still feels unreal. You've survived things most people never will," he whispered. This is the reward." In the weeks that followed, their bond deepened in quiet, unremarkable moments. Ava falling asleep on Ethan's shoulder while Noah napped on her chest. Hazel telling Ethan, "You're my favorite grown-up now." Ethan canceling an important meeting just to stay home and cook Ava's favorite soup. The way Ava leaned into him now without hesitation. They weren't just lovers anymore. They weren't just parents. They were a family. Real. Messy. Healing. Months pass and the family finds their rhythm. But just as everything begins to feel stable, an unexpected opportunity arrives for Ethan that could change everything, including where they call home. It had been 6 months since Noah was born. The apartment now buzzed with a new rhythm: feedings, diaper changes, school pickups, laughter during bath time, and the quiet moments at night when all 5 of them curled up together, tangled in blankets and peace. Ava had started writing again, journal entries, reflections, even the beginnings of a children's book inspired by the twins. Ethan was juggling business with fatherhood, but for once, he wasn't rushing anywhere. He was present. Grounded. Happy. Until the email came. He was sitting at the dining table one morning, feeding Noah mashed banana with one hand and checking his inbox with the other. Then he stopped. The message was from the board of a major tech firm in San Francisco. They wanted him. CEO position. Multi-million-dollar salary. International expansion. A team of visionaries. His dream. From before everything changed. He stared at the screen for a long time. That evening, he sat on the couch beside Ava, who was rocking Noah to sleep. The twins were on the floor, building a pillow fort. "I need to talk to you," he said gently. She looked at him immediately, sensing the weight in his tone. "I got an offer," he said. "A big one." He showed her the email. She read it. Twice. Then, slowly, she looked up. "San Francisco?" He nodded. There was silence. Not tension. Just pause. Ava handed Noah to him and stood, walking toward the window. The city lights reflected in her eyes. "It's what you always wanted," she said. "Yeah," Ethan admitted. "It is. Do you want to take it?" He didn't answer right away. "I don't know. I thought I did." Ava turned to face him. "If you go, would you want us to go with you?" "Of course," he said, almost instinctively. But they both knew what that meant. Leaving everything behind, the girls' school, the home they had built together, the friends they'd made, the routines that brought them peace. Ava's slow return to writing. Their calm. It wasn't a simple relocation. It was a reset. And after everything, resets came with risk. "I'm not saying no," Ava said softly. "But I need to know one thing." Ethan stood, facing her now. "Is this about who you used to be, or who you want to be now?" He didn't answer immediately. Because that was the real question. That night, after the kids were asleep, Ethan sat alone in the nursery, watching Noah sleep, remembering the way Ava had looked at him when she asked that question. He thought about everything they had built. The quiet mornings. The chaos. The safety. And he realized his dream had changed. Because he had changed. As Ethan makes his decision, Ava faces a quiet revelation of her own, one that forces her to ask whether she's truly let go of her past, or if part of her still believes she's not worthy of the life she's built. The next morning, the apartment was unusually quiet. Ethan had barely slept. He'd spent the night thinking, not about spreadsheets or boardrooms or flights to Silicon Valley. He thought about Harper's drawings on the fridge, Hazel's shy smile when he braided her hair, Noah's small hand gripping his finger as he fell asleep, and Ava. The way she leaned on him now, not because she needed rescuing, but because she trusted him enough to rest. She was the strongest person he knew. And she had given him something no title or salary ever could, a family. He found her on the balcony that morning, a mug of tea in her hands, hair still messy from sleep. The sunrise cast a golden hue over her face. She didn't look at him when she spoke. "You've made your choice," she said quietly. "I have." She finally turned. "And?" Ethan stepped closer. His voice was steady. "I'm not taking the offer." Her eyes widened, not in disappointment, but disbelief. "You're not?" He shook his head. "I built my life chasing titles and numbers and status. But I've never felt more alive than I do right here. With you. With them. This is my life now, Ava. And I'm not leaving it behind." She stared at him, trying to hold back the emotion rising in her throat. "Are you sure?" Ethan smiled gently. "I've never been more sure of anything." She threw her arms around him, burying her face into his chest. But even as he held her, even as relief washed through her body like warmth after a storm, a thought crept in. What if I don't deserve this? Later that day, while Ethan played with the twins in the garden, Ava sat alone in the nursery, Noah asleep in the crib. She looked around. The walls they painted together. The bookshelf Ethan had built by hand. The life they had created. And yet, part of her still held her breath. Why? Because deep down, she was still that girl who had once been abandoned. Still that woman who had once begged for help on a sidewalk. And though she had survived it all, she had never truly asked herself, "Do I believe I deserve this joy, or do I think it's temporary?" That night she opened her journal. And she wrote a single sentence. "The greatest battle now is not for survival, it's for belonging." Ava begins the quiet journey of finally healing from within, not by escaping the past, but by embracing who she is now. But healing isn't linear, and just when things seem calm, a letter from someone unexpected arrives. It was a Thursday afternoon when the letter arrived. Ava found it tucked inside the mailbox, handwritten, no return address, just her name in delicate, looping cursive. She froze when she saw it. There was something familiar in the penmanship. Something that tugged at memories she had long buried beneath hardship, motherhood, and survival. She took it upstairs, locked herself in the bedroom, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. Inside was a single page. "Ava, I don't know if you'll ever read this. I don't know if you'll want to. But I needed to say it. I failed you. As your mother, as your support system, as your safe place. I wasn't any of those things when you needed me most. I let my pride speak louder than your pain. I judged you when I should have held you. I looked away when I should have fought beside you. There's no excuse for what I did, or didn't do. But if there's still a part of you that remembers who I was before fear changed me, I hope you'll let that memory be the start of something new. I heard you're doing well. That you have a family now. A good man. Children. I'm glad. Truly. You were always stronger than I gave you credit for. If one day you want to write back, I've included my address. If not, just know I'm proud of you. Love. Mom. Ava didn't cry immediately. She just stared at the letter. It felt surreal, like holding a photograph from another lifetime. A version of her that used to stand in that small kitchen at age 17, screaming at a mother who refused to understand. They hadn't spoken since Ava left home, pregnant, terrified, and alone. Now, after years of silence, here was a letter. Not asking for forgiveness. Just offering peace. That night, she didn't mention it to Ethan. She just held Noah a little longer before bed, tucked the twins in more slowly, and stood by the window after the apartment had gone still, rereading every word by the moonlight. Her mother was still out there. And for the first time, Ava didn't feel anger. She felt curiosity. Ava must decide whether to respond, or to let the past remain closed. But sometimes, the road to healing isn't just about what we receive, it's about what we choose to give. The letter stayed on Ava's nightstand for days. Each morning, she glanced at it. Each night, she touched it gently, as if testing whether it still carried weight. It did. But something inside her was changing. She didn't feel the urgency to respond. Not because there was hate in her heart, but because she had finally made peace without needing the other person to say sorry first. One afternoon, while folding Noah's tiny clothes in the nursery, Ethan entered quietly. He had seen the letter. He never asked about it. But today, he sat beside her and said gently, "Do you want to talk about it?" Ava shook her head slowly. "I don't think I need to." He waited, sensing she wasn't done. "I used to believe that healing only came when someone came back and made it right," she continued, her voice low. "But now, I think healing is when you can keep walking, even when no one comes back at all." Ethan didn't say anything. He just reached over and took her hand. Ava smiled softly. "Maybe one day I'll respond. Maybe not. But right now, I don't want to look behind me. I want to look at this." She nodded toward the crib, toward the hallway, toward the life they'd built. "And keep building forward." That night, while the rest of the house slept, Ava took the letter and placed it inside a small wooden box. Not hidden. Not destroyed. Just put away. A piece of her past. No longer a chain. Just a page. With the past truly behind her, Ava opens herself fully to the present. But when Ethan surprises her with something completely unexpected, she realizes life still has room to astonish, even after the hardest chapters. The morning began like any other. The twins were painting on the kitchen floor, leaving trails of glitter and giggles across the tiles. Noah was napping with one fist curled by his cheek. Ava stood by the sink, humming quietly, washing bottles, her hair tied in a messy knot, her body still adapting to the rhythm of motherhood. She didn't notice Ethan slip out. He returned an hour later, holding a small velvet box in one hand and a nervous, childlike look on his face. "Can I steal you for a minute?" he asked. Ava looked at him, confused but smiling. "Now? Right now?" He led her upstairs to the rooftop terrace of the building, the place where they had shared so many quiet moments before the world got louder with tiny footsteps and lullabies. But today, something was different. There were lights strung across the rails, candles flickering in the late afternoon breeze. A single table set with her favorite tea and cookies Harper had helped him bake. And at the center of the table, a folded letter with her name on it. Ava looked at him, heart pounding. "What is this?" He didn't answer. Just nodded for her to sit. Hands trembling slightly, she opened the letter. "Ava, you once asked me why I stayed. The truth is, I didn't stay. I arrived. I arrived the moment I saw you on that sidewalk. The moment I saw Harper and Hazel. The moment I saw your strength, your tired smile, and the fire in your eyes that hadn't gone out, even when the world gave you every reason to let it. This isn't about saving you. It never was. This is about choosing you. Every day. And if you'll let me, I want to choose all of you, forever. The girl you were. The woman you've become. The mother you are. And the future we're still writing. Ethan. When she looked up, her eyes blurred with tears. Ethan was kneeling. The ring wasn't extravagant. It was simple. Elegant. Set with a small stone that had belonged to his grandmother. But his voice, that was what shook her most. Ava Monroe, will you marry me? For a moment, she couldn't speak. So she nodded. Once. Then again. And again. Yes, she finally whispered. Yes, I will. That night, as the twins danced barefoot in the living room and Noah cooed in Ava's arms, Ethan slipped the ring on her finger. There was no fanfare. No crowd. Just family. Just love. Just peace. With their love now sealed, Ava and Ethan begin planning a simple but meaningful wedding. But a conversation with Harper leads Ava to realize that the most important vows aren't the ones spoken at the altar, but the ones lived every single day. The weeks following the engagement were filled with gentle anticipation. There were no guest lists, no grand venues. Ava and Ethan didn't want extravagance. They wanted meaning. They chose to marry in the garden courtyard of their own building, under the same tree where Hazel had once tied a ribbon for her. Lucky wish. Harper wanted to be the flower girl. Hazel insisted she'd hold the rings. Noah would be carried, of course, looking dashing in a tiny blue vest. Ava ordered a simple white dress online. Ethan had his suit tailored quietly, with Harper helping him pick the tie. Everything felt grounded. Real. And for the first time, Ava wasn't anxious about something good falling apart. She was simply present. One night, while Ethan rocked Noah to sleep, Ava lay on the couch with Harper, flipping through a photo album they were making for the wedding. Are you happy, Mommy? Harper asked suddenly. The question caught her off guard. Ava smiled. I am. Harper looked down at one of the pages she had drawn, a stick figure family holding hands. Do you promise you'll always be with us? Even when the baby cries too much? Ava laughed softly. Yes, sweetie. Always. Even when he cries. And even when I get messy and you have to wash my hair? Definitely then too. Harper paused. I think love is like a blanket. You don't have to say it's warm. You just feel it. Ava stopped. Something about that sentence echoed through her. You don't have to say it's warm, you just feel it. That night, after the children were asleep, Ava sat beside Ethan and whispered, I think I've spent my whole life searching for loud love. Big gestures. People proving they wouldn't leave. But what I have now is different. It's quiet, Ethan said. She nodded. And consistent. Like breathing. Like home. Ethan took her hand, resting it over his heart. Then let's keep building that. Not just for us. But for them. Ava smiled, tears gathering. I don't need a perfect wedding. I just want them to grow up seeing what real love looks like. You mean like cleaning yogurt off the walls every morning? Ethan teased. She laughed. Exactly that. The wedding day arrives, and what begins as a simple ceremony turns into an unforgettable moment of unity, healing, and a promise that echoes beyond vows, a love that chose to stay. The garden courtyard was quiet that morning. Soft rays of sunlight filtered through the trees. Wildflowers peeked through the stones. A string quartet played gently in the background, Hazel's request, after seeing them once in a cartoon. The chairs were simple. The guests were few, just neighbors who had become like family. But the feeling was everything. Ava stood in a corner of the building, holding Harper and Hazel's hands. Her dress flowed like air around her legs, light and elegant, with a lace detail her mother once sewed into a baby blanket. Noah, in Ethan's arms, wore a tiny bow tie and chewed on a rubber giraffe. Mrs. Dorsey gently touched Ava's shoulder. "Ready, dear?" Ava nodded. But not because she felt fully ready. She nodded because this time, she wasn't afraid. When she walked down the short path between the chairs, barefoot, hand in hand with the twins, a hush fell over the courtyard. Ethan turned to see her, and for a moment, he forgot to breathe. She wasn't just beautiful. She was whole. Not because life had been easy, but because she had kept going. Hazel placed the rings gently on the table. Harper dropped flower petals from a paper basket she made herself. And Ava reached Ethan's side, eyes gleaming with emotion. There were no elaborate speeches. No rehearsed declarations. Just Ethan, holding her hands, his voice soft and steady. "I don't promise to never make mistakes. But I promise to always grow beside you. To never walk ahead or behind, but always with you. To be the quiet you need after the noise. The roof when it rains. The warmth when the world is cold." Ava's lips trembled as she responded. "I don't need saving. I never did. But I needed someone who saw me, and stayed anyway. And that's what you've been. Not the hero, but the home." The officiant smiled with tears in her eyes. "You may now kiss." But Ava had already pulled Ethan into her arms. The kiss was not dramatic. It was soft. Long. Like a promise that didn't need to be spoken anymore. When they turned to face the crowd, the twins ran to their sides, grabbing their hands. Hazel whispered, "Now we're really real." Ethan laughed. "We've always been real." And Ava, looking at the small faces around her, at the boy in Ethan's arms, at the petals still floating in the air, knew it was true. As their journey continues, Ava reflects on everything they've overcome. But sometimes, the greatest part of love isn't surviving the storm. It's learning how to live in the calm without fearing the next thunder. The honeymoon wasn't a trip to Paris. It wasn't even a weekend getaway. It was pancakes on a Sunday morning with flour on Hazel's nose. It was Ethan dancing with Harper in the kitchen while Noah clapped in his high chair. It was Ava, standing by the window with a coffee in hand, finally, still. The kind of stillness that doesn't ache. The kind that feels earned. She had expected marriage to change everything. But the truth? It didn't. Because what mattered had already been built long before vows were spoken. Ava now woke up every morning not wondering what might go wrong, but quietly grateful for all che estava dando certo. The girls had stopped calling Ethan Ethan. Now sometimes it was Dad. And when they slipped and called him that, no one corrected it. Noah babbled his name in every room. Ethan, once a man lost in his work, now became the anchor of their evenings. Board games. Homework. Night feedings. And the sound of Ava's laughter echoing in the hallway like music he never wanted to stop hearing. One quiet night, long after the children had fallen asleep, Ethan and Ava sat on the rooftop again. No candles. No letters. No surprises. Just stars. And Ava said, almost to herself, "For the first time in my life, I'm not waiting for the floor to fall out from under me." Ethan looked at her. "That's because we built the floor together." She looked at him then, really looked. Not as the man who had found her in the street. Not as the father of her child. Not as the provider or the protector. But as her equal. A soul who had also survived loneliness, pressure, and silence. And had chosen to stay. 1 year later, a small note in Ava's journal marks the final chapter of this story. A reflection on love, healing, and the kind of family that doesn't need to be perfect to be whole. 1 year later. The walls of the apartment had new drawings, mostly Noah's scribbles now. The twins were taller. More curious. More confident. Ethan had grayer hairs at the temples, which Ava secretly adored. And Ava? She was writing again. Really writing. Not just reflections. Not just memories. But stories, her story. Some raw. Some soft. Some unfinished. And one afternoon, while Noah napped beside her and sunlight danced across the notebook on her lap, she wrote a final entry. There was a time I thought love had to be loud. Big. Painful. Earned through suffering. But now I know, love can be quiet. It can be soft hands brushing hair from your face. It can be the sound of tiny feet running down the hallway. It can be the man who shows up, not once, but every day. We are not perfect. But we are whole. And that is enough. She closed the journal slowly, placing it on the shelf beside a family photo, the 5 of them, arms tangled, laughter frozen in time. Ethan walked in, holding 2 mugs. Tea? He offered. She smiled. Always. He kissed her cheek before sitting beside her. And they said nothing. Because there was nothing left to fix. Nothing left to chase. Only this moment. And it was everything.